Let's get started. We have a little less than an hour and a lot to discuss. So I would love if you can give us a short intro about you, the company you started, your background, what inspired you, and how you find the motivation to kill it every day.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So my name's Janessa Ferrell, and I am the CEO, co-founder of QuestRead. So a little bit about me. My background is in education. So I've spent the last 15 years working with elementary children who are learning to read. As a reading specialist, elementary teacher in many different capacities in Canada and the US. I'm also a mother of three. So my children are 5, 10, and 13 right now. And so I've spent some time also homeschooling them as well.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess, why should people care about what we're talking about today? Why should they watch the recording, or if they're here, why are soft skills important in your opinion in enhancing parent-children relationships?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, soft skills are, we know we've been talking a lot about business and soft skills, why it's important there, right? Having communication skills, being able to empathize with people that you meet, being able to lead, manage your time, all these things are very important and are things that we want to teach our children. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it kind of puts the pressure on parents to excel in these things so that they can model them for their children. But along with that, it's important that we practice using soft skills when we relate to our children and when we help them relate to one another and to the people around them. And there's a lot of really practical things that we can do to make that happen. So I'm excited to talk about that with you today.
Yes, awesome. And me too, just to give a quick background, I'm the co-founder of Dextego, an AI coach for soft skills such as communication, collaboration, leadership. So I'm always eager to talk to people about how soft skills play an important role in their lives, in their careers, in their roles. And I think being a parent is obviously something I'm not experiencing, but I'm super curious about, because only if you put yourselves in other shoes, you create that empathy that helps you in anything else in your life. As we know, soft skills are super transferable skills. So I'm very excited to talk to you today about this and hear your thoughts and learn more from your experience. So
Yeah.
I guess to start it off, my question would be, when it comes to parenting, kind of mentioned already a couple of those soft skills, but which do you think are particularly relevant and why?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's 4 that I think I focus on the most in my parenting. That would be time management, problem solving, communication, and emotional intelligence. And I chose those ones because, well, time management is something that we as adults all are still working on as more and more things get added to our plate. But as a child, you can start practicing good habits with managing your time. And so some kids are better at this than others. And certain of my children need additional skills and strategies and tools in their tool belt to be able to manage their time well. So I know that's something I spend a lot of time working on my kids with. Problem solving is an interesting one because so often parents are just quick to solve the problems for their children. And instead, I think we need to be stepping back and, letting them solve their own problems so that they can build and develop these skills. Otherwise, they're going to end up adults who don't know how to deal with conflict or situations, right? And communication, well, I mean, that goes without saying, they often don't get a whole lot of time to have conversations like we're having today. With social media now, they're spending a lot of time texting or like doing a fun little TikTok dance, but they're not often like doing this, right? Having a full conversation, having dialogue back and forth. That's very different kinds of communication, and it's needed in the workplace and for them in their everyday life.
Absolutely. I think while you were speaking, an example came to mind that I love my mom for doing this. Like when I was young, she would send me to stores alone, like if I had to return a shirt, let's say, or something small, and I would be like, yeah, I need you to do this. She'd be like, nope, you got this, you can go. And that is tremendously helped me, I think, today. Like these communication skills of talking to random people I didn't know, adults, that I was a little kid looking at. I'm like, okay, now I have to, pay and do this, and like thinking through this, overcoming like the fear of the unknown as a kid is just super powerful. And parents can be sometimes way too overprotective, so they don't want to give this uncertainty to their kids, but that's what pushes them to learn. And every obstacle and challenge like is a huge opportunity for the kid to learn, and to overcome their own like comfort zone.
Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as ordering your own food when you go to a restaurant, right? Let them speak for themselves and have that conversation with the waiter, waitress, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, can you think of any example that your kids came up to you and said, yeah, thanks for doing that because now I can do this? Or have they
My kids are not at the stage yet where they're thanking me for these lessons. They're more still at the complaining about the lessons that they're learning. But my 13-year-old is starting to put some of these things into play, right? So she's a competitive gymnast and often has fundraising that she needs to do. And so now she has the skills and the confidence and the communication skills built up that she can go around and ask people to give money to certain causes on her own without needing me to be there or speak for her. And so I think that's really great, and in a way that I've seen her grow.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. So talk to me a little bit about active listening. How do you think that parents can become better at active listening? Like what are some practical strategies they can utilize to learn to enhance those skills, and use more positive language?
Yeah, I think this is really important and something that changes as your kids grow up, right? When you first have a baby, you're just, kind of in your own world. And then at some point, the kid starts talking back to you and you can have a conversation with them all the time. And it's really hard when they're a toddler to actively listen, because a lot of times they're just talking constantly. So you have things to do, So it's sometimes hard to stop and be like, I'm going to put the dishes down or whatever I was doing and just get down on their level. But I think when you pause and you physically go down on their level and you make eye contact with them and you just show them that you are listening and you don't say anything, you just look at them and you can't interrupt, because if you interrupt, they're going to be distracted and lose what they're saying. And just be there, just listen. They'll move on and, tell them that, so it changes, right? So at the toddler stage, I think you just eye contact and listening, getting on their level. And as they grow older, it's important to kind of do other things like restate what they said, right? So after they tell me something, sometimes it might be very jumbled and I might not get to the root of what they're really saying, because what they're telling me doesn't always match up with what they're saying, right? And so I might have to rephrase it, be like, so did you feel like left out in that situation? Or did you think that someone was making fun of you? And just asking these clarifying questions sometimes helps them realize that you're listening and that you care. And also helps you kind of get to the root of what they're actually saying.
I love that. It reminds me of sales, that they say you need to mirror the other person to create that like connection. Is the same thing here, but in totally different context.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of the impact and intent gap, like we talk about in psychology, because as a parent, you might think like, okay, I'm doing my thing now, I'm not paying attention, but it's not disrespectful or my kid won't pay attention. But it's all these subconscious like stimuli that the kid takes in and then grows up thinking, oh, my parent was ignoring me, or like I felt like disrespected, or So I think as a like daughter perspective, I would say what's very important for parents is to indicate that not only they listen, but they're the number one supporters of their kids. Like always show that you believe in them and you push them and you just want the best for them, which is what a parent, I guess, should ideally hope for their kids, right? Is be the rock for them.
Yeah, and it can't always be on our terms, right? If I want to have a conversation with my child about something, but they really want to go outside and move around, well, maybe I need to go outside and move around with them and kick the ball for a little bit while I'm talking. Or if my daughter is, cleaning her room, maybe I go there and I just clean and talk. Because sometimes when you're doing things, that helps the communication to flow better. And it can be kind of awkward to just sit there and be like, tell me about your day. What's bothering you, right? That's not very realistic. The conversations flow when you're in action, I think.
It's a little bit about negotiation too, right? Like you have to, as you said, say your terms, but also make some concessions. So how do you deal with that? How can you do conflict resolution and negotiations with a child?
Yeah, there's a lot of compromise, I guess. I think just having firm boundaries and like knowing, being clear as a parent, communicating what the expectations are to your child is important. So that if there's a conflict or they break those rules, we're like, okay, well, that was the rule. They knew to begin with. Instead of always reacting to things, you think ahead, okay, these are the limits that we have for these things, or these are the rules of the house. And then you can come back to that because they already knew. So it kind of comes back to setting us up for success instead of always, having that conflict. Then it's not just me against you. Then it's me reminding you of the rules that we agreed to ahead of time.
Yeah. And it takes also a lot of patience, right? And self-control, I would say.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this too with things we're wanting to teach our child and be as a parent. I think we have to really practice them, be extra careful about them with ourselves. So when you think about emotional regulation, for instance, if you're having a stressful day and you come back with that stress on you and then you try to interact with your kids, it's going to come through and you might say or do things that you don't mean to, right? So you have to be able to regulate yourself and your own emotions first before you can go into that relationship. So, for everyone, they have their own thing. But for me, I find that if I come home and I'm in that zone, I'm going to my spin bike and I'm going to try to spin first and get that stress out and just, clear my mind and then come in and be a better mom to my kids instead of coming in with all that angst or stress from the day.
Workout is the best for releasing for sure. But some people just want a long time, and that's totally fine too. Just understanding as to the boundary and kind of preventing a negative situation by distancing yourself from it. So when you know you're not ready, just don't go home, take a little while, take a walk, and then go back to that space so that you don't get triggered. But emotional regulation, emotional intelligence is something that has always fascinated me. I think in a world where there's so many triggers, like there's so much external circumstances, factors that can affect our mood, it's very hard to stay focused. Apart from like working out, how do you go about that in your daily life? Like how can you compartmentalize and focus on being a parent? Because you're also a businesswoman, you're a founder, and you're talking to tons of different people every day. So how do you do that?
I think it's important to just be present where you're at. So when I leave my office and I go and I be with my kids, I want to do that completely. Or if I'm going to hang with my friends, I'm just doing that, right? Trying to do all the things all at once isn't usually a good thing. But sometimes if I have to be in the caretaker mode, but I'm, in a different headspace, I find it helpful to just listen to music. So I'll just change the mood, switch things up. Let's put on some music, dance it out in the kitchen, and then just kind of switches that off too. So just changing the mood, right? And something clear that's like, okay, we're not in work mode now. We're switching to play mode, or, we're all had this stressful conversation or this conflict we dealt with. Let's mix this up. Let's have a game. Let's go play something. Like leaning into the fun, I think is one of my strategies for switching that all up and changing the mood of the room.
Yeah, I definitely do the same in terms of music. I love it. Like the fact that it can change your mood like that with 10 seconds of listening to a song, I think it's amazing. It's something that has always been a very good trick for me too. So it resonates. Now, changing gears a little bit to education, like edtech, how did you understand how your kids learn? Like, what is their way of learning? If it's more visual or not? Like, what was that like when they were growing up?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Well, I spent many years as a classroom teacher too, so I've been around kids at different stages and ages. So I was familiar with general ways that kids act at different stages, and there's a lot of similarities to them, right? A lot of kids in elementary years, especially, are not very in touch with their emotions, for instance. And especially in the early years, they might not have the words to describe what they're going through. So just giving them strategies and things to use with that, I think was really helpful, right? So asking clarifying questions, like I mentioned earlier, was one way that I would deal with that. So if they said they're like, I'm mad, or I'm not having a good day, I'm having a bad day, right? We do like this thing at dinner table, or we rate the day out of 5. And, then give some kind of explanation. And then it's just kind of a way to get at it and be like, oh, why was it a 2? Like, what happened? Nothing happened. Oh, did you feel sad? Did you feel angry? Did you feel mad? Right. And then they can kind of start to give words to those emotions, and more specific words as they get older. Like, maybe I was jealous, or I felt left out, or I was, missing my old friend, or whatever it might be. Just kind of knowing what's appropriate at different stages and having the right questions to ask at different times. Just part of like getting to know your kid and what stage they're at, and it's something that just happens as you build a relationship with them, I think.
Yeah, wow. So at what point did you come up with the idea of starting Questread? Was it while you were a teacher, or being a parent, something clicked and you said, I want to help my kids learn?
Yeah, it's kind of both a little bit. I was an elementary school teacher who loved trying new things in my classroom. So I would experiment with new apps or new ideas and methodologies all the time. At one point, I even brought a boat into my classroom, like a legitimate boat, because I saw that the kids like to read in something that was different. So I was like, if they go in here, the only thing they can do with this boat is read. So they would go in and just read in the boat. So I saw that like outside the box, like making things fun, motivating them is a really important thing. But I was using all these apps in my classroom that I really didn't like, and the kids didn't like. They weren't usable. They weren't fun. They were very outdated. And so I just kept searching and searching, and I didn't find anything that I liked. And then I switched, and I took my kids out of school and I homeschooled them while we traveled. And I started using even more apps with my kids and realized I still don't find what I'm looking for. And I tried even more things. I said, one day I'm going to build something that meets my standards, that is actually fun, and it actually works. And it engages kids so that they read more and actually achieve their goals. And interestingly enough, right, so this is before the pandemic, about 5 years ago. Then the situation has gotten so much worse. Now, 68% of 4th graders in the US can't read at grade level. So our situation is becoming quite dire, and we need to be acting soon. So now is like the best time for us to be launching Questread, because kids need it now more than they ever did before.
I love that. I mean, the best founders I've met have always had a similar story of, I was looking for it, I couldn't find it, and I did it. Because you bring in such a unique perspective. You do all the market research as a consumer yourself first. So now you have the client empathy, and on top of that, you put your creativity into it, you make something super powerful. And similarly to you, like the way I created Dextego was because I was searching for tools we could utilize at Activio, where I was doing HR and talent development, looking for tools for our employees, something that would help them grow, because we're such a small team and we didn't have enough like time or resources to plan webinars, workshops all the time. We wanted people to be able to do it on their own time. And I researched everything, and I couldn't find something very interactive, personalized, or cost effective, but also fun. Like, I want learning to be fun for people. I don't think it's a punishment. You shouldn't feel like you're being just graded and you have to learn things by heart to pass an exam. You should want to do it, and something gamified, something, with nice graphics can really help do that. So I think, starting any business is hard, but at least when you can check the fact that, hey, now I'm finally building something that I couldn't find, but I know is needed for the world, gives you all the motivation to persevere.
Exactly, right? It has to be a real problem that you understand deeply and you empathize with. And I like what you said about, like, both of us are leaning into it has to be fun, it has to be gamified in order to learn. And that's so true with research, right? When you are stressed or you don't want to do something, you're unmotivated, there's like a blocker just preventing learning from happening. And so in education, we learn that you have to first motivate them to want to learn, and then make it a de-stressful, an unstressed environment, and then they'll learn. So if we design apps and products the way that motivates them first, then we're ultimately going to be more successful in helping them learn.
100%. And I don't like when people, complain and overgeneralize that, oh, Gen Z is lazy, or like they don't do things, they're always on their phones. The fact that is that they're also victim of the reality they're born in. Super technology everywhere. So the competition is like 10 times more fierce than it used to be in terms of creating that one app that will attract their attention. And so I don't think, the kids are to be blamed that they're lazy. If anything, product developers and like founders are to be blamed that they don't make something good enough for them to use. Like it takes both parties for sure, but I think it's on us to allow learning to become part of someone's daily routine, whether it's a kid or an adult, because the time issue, the classic, oh, I don't have time, I work too much, will always be the case. The thing is, what is worth it for you to take some time off and do it?
Exactly. We need to make learning more of a daily thing that we do and not separate it into this classroom, right? And that's kind of what both of our products do, integrate it into the daily life. So you can just like pick up your phone and suddenly you are in a learning experience. That's amazing.
Yeah, and how do you envision it 10 years from now? Like, how do you see the different trends coming in, VR, AR, all this gamification? Like, what can you envision that education will look like in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know what I hope it is like. I hope that it's more democratic. That's my hope for technology, that it will have the power, because it has the power to do that, right? We know how to teach reading and math and all these things. We have a lot of research to back it up, but it takes so long to transfer that to educators. There's probably a 15, 20-year gap between when we do the research to when it gets integrated into the classroom. And also, even then, the top teachers often work in school districts and schools where the parents can afford to pay for them, right? So we don't have an equal school system. And so what I hope is that technology will be able to allow every child to have access to a quality education that is research-based, that's fun and gamified, that is personalized for them, where they can interact and go on their own pace. So they're not put in this little box that says, you're a first grade student who is a boy, and so then you have to have this experience, right? We want it to be much more flexible than that, I would hope.
Absolutely. And what I always say, professors, teachers, again, have limited resources. So what they usually tend to do is teach for the average of the class. And that is very problematic because you lose the kids that cannot follow and you lose the ones that are superstars and are high potentials. And the same thing is at the workplace. When you do a workshop and you try to uplift people's skills, some will follow and some will not. But what can you do? So only tools like that are personalized can help. And the other thing in terms of soft skills is that they tend to take so long to be developed just because you require life experience. we talked about problem solving, conflict resolution, communication. You need to have experiences to hone these skills. But if we find a way, that's what we're aiming to do also next ago, to shorten that period, then you allow these people much more earlier in their careers to have an impact on others. Like we're talking about self-awareness and emotional regulation. Without these skills, how can you go and be a leader? Like it's so important to teach kids and young professionals early on the skills that matter the most. The technical skills, of course, are equally important, but they're not the ones that will take you to the next level in your career or in your life. So I agree with you. We need a lot more of work in the field of edtech. But what's your opinion about VR? Have you thought at all about it as a way of teaching young kids?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for it. I think one of the blockers right now is the cost of the devices, right? So it's not an option for a lot of schools that can't afford it. So, in a lot of ways, AR is better because you can just pick up any mobile device and use that. So some kind of mixed reality, I think is the best option right now, or find a more affordable solution to VR. Right. I know there's really exciting things happening in ed tech with VR still, like especially in the workforce training. There's a lot of things happening there, but it's not become mainstream in elementary classrooms because it's just not affordable for a lot of schools. So I hope that will change. And I'm excited to see what happens in the future with it.
Yeah, same here. Actually, we've never used any VR headset, any hardware. So I don't really know how I would feel about it, but I think it's definitely part of the horizon. Like we see costs going down and down all the time. So I feel like it will be something key, and metaverse will come back to life. I think that's where kids see themselves because they play so many video games. They can feel more connected to others than just by playing online and just talking to a robot. They feel that connection stronger, and that's what we want to do too. We want to do peer-to-peer games so that you feel this connection even if your school is remote. Like I had to do my master's during COVID, so everything was remote, and people like just begged to do Zoom calls for like study groups. It's funny because today everyone's like, I'm zoomed out, but back then it was the only thing you could do, right? So I think if a kid was like born in that environment of like remote work and seeing their parents remotely all the time, they now see connection through the metaverse. So it's all contextual, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe good to like have that metaverse experience to build the skills, as long as it transfers into daily life as well. If there's a tendency to just stay in the digital environment all the time, I don't think that's healthy either. And we might have that problem in the next coming years, right? If people get super comfortable doing Zoom calls, for instance, they might not be as comfortable sitting down and having coffee with someone down the street. So as long as we can kind of keep the balance of both, so we don't lose skills in real life and only be able to relate in the metaverse, right?
100%. And I think for introverts is very tricky because they, for the first time, feel like they found their place. They can become sociable online, but indeed, how can you then help these people transfer the skills in the real world and push them gently to get out of their comfort zone? That will be a big challenge, I think, for educators and also managers and bosses.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a new thing because, even some things are different. Some of the soft skills, if you think about your communication style, you can only see my top half. So you don't really know if I'm like leaning over or, all the physical communication signs are kind of gone, and eye contact's a little different online too, right? I can't really see into your eyes if we're on the virtual session here. I get a little closer. Yeah, there we go. But it's just such a different thing. Yeah.
Stuff. So do your kids now go to school, or they're still like homeschooled?
They go to school. Yeah. We homeschooled them for a year. That happened to be the year that the pandemic hit and the lockdowns happened. So great timing on my part, right?
Yeah, you did great.
Yeah.
And how do they like it? Do they say if they preferred before or now?
They like being in school now, and they're very much into sports. So they like the opportunity to be back into their sports and doing that with their friends. But it was good for us to do that for a time. I don't think for us it would be the right thing to do full time, especially now that I'm working. And that was a kind of a different season of life, like a year we took that was just like different. And we all got to do more personalized learning during that time. But now this is the best thing for us, for them to be in school, and it works out really well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you said something very powerful there when you said about the fact that they like sports. Like schools, being on campus, even when you're in college, like it's so powerful because of all the rest that happens apart from education, like your typical classroom setting. And that I can't imagine a world that is replaceable by just virtual e-learning tools. It's extremely hard, and people like need these interactions to become self-aware. I remember when I was studying psychology, there was this theory that said for you to become self-aware, like there's a quadrant, and some of it is things that you know about yourself that others don't. Some is what others know about you that you don't know, and you have to learn through them, etc. So without interacting at that early stage of life with other humans, diverse humans, you can never get to that self realization and actualization level, which yeah, I don't know, we might really struggle if we go full on metaverse like education. It's gonna be
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I'm trying to imagine playing baseball, right? And also, we need those opportunities. The thing I love about sports is that my kids can fail, and they do, right? So they try things and they fail at it, and then they work on their growth mindset. So they see, okay, I didn't know this skill then, and then I practiced every day that week, and my coach taught me this, and then at the end of the season, this is what I was able to do, and I can see that growth and track it. I think that's what's really kind of unique about sports. It puts pressure on them in a good way that gets them out of their comfort zone and forces them to stretch themselves and change their own thoughts about themselves, right? Which I don't know that we would always do if we weren't in a physical environment like that.
And to bring it all together now, what would you say has been your biggest lesson in life so far? Maybe a challenging time or like a mistake if you think that proved to be a huge learning moment for who you are today.
I think maybe kind of piggybacking off what I said about the growth mindset. When I was a child, I didn't think I was very good at math or school in general. And compared to my siblings, maybe I wasn't. And I was, more of a musical person or artistic. And I had this idea in my head about who I was. And when I changed my mind about that, and when I realized that's not actually that's not actually true. That's not who I am. I could be whatever I want. I could study and ace this math test. I could learn this new skill and do that. I can, it's only as big as your mind. And so the more things I would try to do to stretch myself to be like, that's not who Janessa is. Actually, that's my tattoo too. It says, it says beyond. So that's kind of what it means. And that was my life lesson to myself, to be like, don't let the limits of your mind tell you who you are, right? Stretch yourself to do that. And so then I said too, one of my things was, I want to be CEO of my own company before I turn 40. And in 2 weeks, I'm turning 40. So that's kind of it. Yeah. So that's my big life lesson. You can do more than you think you can do.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we are our worst enemies. I always say that. We really are. Like, we need to break that cycle.
Exactly. Yeah. Speak truth to yourself, right?
Mm,
Speak kindly to ourselves.
amazing. Hashtags Beyond. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, Janessa. It was really inspiring. I appreciate your time, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to see you launch the company and like refer you to all parents I know, young and very ready to like teach their kids new ways of learning.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was a lovely conversation. Yeah. We'll be launching the app this fall. So I'll share more information with you then.
Can't wait. Well, thank you. Take care, and we'll stay in touch.
All right. Take care. Bye.